Like a sudden, violent force of nature, a new breed of American fighter peeled out of the freezing Icelandic skies on August 14, 1942. The aircraft was hunting a Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor, a massive German maritime patrol bomber, and as the distance closed, the German crew watched in absolute disbelief. They had never encountered such an imposing machine. While the airframe was undeniably sleek, its radical twin-tail architecture gave the warbird a terrifying futuristic silhouette. Before the German gunners could even react to the strange shape, Second Lieutenant Elsa Shahan unleashed the full fury of the aircraft's innovative nose-mounted arsenal. Firing at a rate of over 400 rounds a minute, the concentrated stream of fire tore through the enemy bomber, dispatching the Condor in mere seconds. It was a historic moment, marking the first successful American aerial engagement against the Luftwaffe in the European theatre of World War II. Less than 6 months later, the fighter was proving that its dominance was not limited to the Arctic, taking full advantage of its versatility in the blistering heat of North Africa. The psychological impact of the machine was confirmed near a dusty Allied encampment in Tunisia, where a lone German pilot surrendered to soldiers. Visibly agitated and shaken by his experience, he pointed frantically to the sky where the twin-engine fighters patrolled. He grumbled a phrase over and over, "Der Gebuschwanzteufel." He was referring to the Lockheed P-38 Lightning, but in his native tongue, he had given it the name that would stick forever, the fork-tailed devil. To understand the genesis of this mechanical demon, one must look back to early 1937, when the United States Army Air Corps issued Circular Proposal X-608. Authored by the visionary First Lieutenants Benjamin S. Kelsey and Gordon P. Saville, the document was less of a standard request and more of a demand for the impossible. The requirements called for a heavily armed interceptor capable of dominating high altitudes with an unprecedented rate of climb. At a minimum, the aircraft needed to carry 1,000 pounds of heavy armament, and if it was to excel at dogfighting, its speed could not be less than 360 miles per hour at altitude. Furthermore, it had to be capable of rocketing to 20,000 feet in just 6 minutes. These specifications were the toughest and most ambitious the Army Air Corps had ever issued to the aviation industry. In response to this daunting challenge, Lockheed formed a secretive, elite engineering team that would eventually evolve into the legendary Skunk Works. Under the brilliant leadership of Hall Hibbard and Clarence Kelly Johnson, the design team began experimenting with various configurations to meet the power requirements. They initially considered a layout where 2 engines were housed in a central fuselage driving push-pull propellers, but they quickly realized that no single American engine in existence could produce enough raw power to meet the military's demands. Consequently, Hibbard and Johnson decided to design the entire aircraft around a pair of massive 1,000 horsepower liquid-cooled 12-cylinder Allison V1 turbosupercharged engines. The resulting platform was a rarity in aviation design, standing in stark contrast to its contemporaries. Lockheed settled on a twin-boom assembly, a distinctive structure where the engines were mounted in the mid-wing sections. These nacelles extended backward into long-tail booms, each fitted with its own rudder and joined together by a horizontal tail stabilizer. To manage the immense power, the engineers utilized counter-rotating propellers to eliminate the dangerous effects of engine torque. This balance was achieved by using handed engines, meaning their crankshafts turned in opposite directions, providing stability during takeoff and combat maneuvers. The assembly also cleverly integrated the turbo superchargers behind the engines, while the pilot was housed in a central pod beneath a bubble canopy, offering exceptional visibility. Perhaps the most lethal advantage of this configuration was the armament placement. Unlike standard American fighters that mounted machine guns in the wings, the P-38 clustered its weapons directly in the nose of the central pod. This meant the pilot did not have to worry about a convergence zone, the specific distance where wing-mounted gunfire meets. Instead, a skilled P-38 pilot could shoot straight and true for immense distances, their fire trajectory remaining parallel and concentrated, allowing them to shred enemy aircraft long before they could return fire. The innovations of the P-38 extended far beyond its engines and weaponry, challenging the very conventions of aviation design. The aircraft's landing gear, for instance, garnered significant attention due to its tricycle layout. In an era where tail draggers were the standard, the P-38's nose wheel configuration provided superior visibility for the pilot during taxiing and takeoff, a critical advantage on crowded airfields. Furthermore, it was the first American fighter to extensively utilize stainless steel in its construction, paired with flush-riveted, butt-joined aluminum skin panels. This technique eliminated the drag caused by protruding rivet heads, creating an aerodynamic skin so smooth it seemed to cheat the wind. By June of 1937, Lockheed had emerged as the undisputed winner of the military contract with its Model 22, a design that soon evolved into the legendary prototype known as the XP-38. The construction of this prototype was a saga in itself, best described as an accident gone right. Work began in July 1938 at the very first iteration of the Skunk Works, which was humbly located inside an old, disused bourbon distillery. There, amidst the faint, lingering scent of spirits, the engineers worked in total secrecy. The ambition of the project came with a staggering price tag. Although the initial contract was settled for $163,000, the complexities of the build caused costs to balloon to nearly $761,000. Yet, the investment yielded a machine years ahead of its time. Of the big three Army fighters of World War II, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the P-51 Mustang, and the Lightning, the P-38 was the first to take to the skies, beating its counterparts by over 2 years. Its maiden flight in January 1939, piloted by Ben Kelsey, revealed a level of performance that bordered on the unbelievable. Just 2 weeks after the initial tests, Kelsey proposed a bold move, relocating the aircraft to continue testing under different conditions. This logistical move turned into a spectacle of speed when, on February 11th, the aircraft flew a cross-country dash from California to New York. During a final stopover at Wright Field, General Henry Hap Arnold, the commander of the USOC, congratulated Kelsey but offered a piece of fateful advice: don't spare the horses. Taking the commander at his word, Kelsey pushed the fighter to the limit, hitting speeds of 420 miles per hour. The P-38 shattered speed records, completing the transcontinental journey in just over 7 hours of flight time. However, the triumph ended in disaster. Upon reaching Mitchell Field in New York, Kelsey was ordered to land behind other traffic. Forced to execute a slow approach, the carburetor suffered from severe icing, choking the engines. The prototype plummeted short of the runway and was totally wrecked, yet the performance data was so compelling that Kelsey was promoted despite the crash. Based on the undeniable speed demonstrated during that record-breaking flight, the Air Corps immediately ordered a batch of 13 early production models designated as IP-38S. This order sharply accelerated the program, transforming Lockheed from a modest manufacturer into a behemoth of government defense contracting. The first IP-38 took flight in September 1940, with the final one delivered in June of the following year. These aircraft were substantially redesigned from the hand-built prototype. They were lighter, featured improved engine fittings, and introduced a critical aerodynamic change. The rotation of the propellers was reversed to spin outward, away from the fuselage. This adjustment significantly enhanced the fighter's stability, turning it into a rock-solid gunnery platform. Despite this potential, the Army remained hesitant, placing more emphasis on mass-producing cheaper, albeit inferior, aircraft like the P-39 and P-40. Consequently, when the United States entered the war in December 1941, there were fewer than 100 P-38 Lightnings available to defend the nation. Little did the military planners know that this scarcity would soon turn into a desperate demand for one of the war's top fighters. The Lightning eventually saw its first major combat deployment in North Africa, but its introduction was marred by tactical misuse. Commanders unwittingly forced the high-altitude interceptor to fight as a low-level tactical support aircraft. Robbed of its altitude advantage, the large fighter was rendered vulnerable to the nimble, single-engine German Me-109s and FW-190s. Furthermore, many American pilots were initially intimidated by the sheer size and mechanical complexity of the twin-engine beast. This ambivalence from the Army Air Force led to a tragic irony. The Lightning failed to exploit its superior range and climb rate during these early encounters, even though it was the only fighter in Europe at the time capable of escorting bombers deep into the heart of German territory. However, while it struggled to find its footing in the mud of North Africa, the fighter would find its true calling on the other side of the globe. The Lightning's turbo-supercharged engines, which allowed it to breathe thin air at extreme heights, proved to be the deciding factor in the Pacific theater. Here, the aircraft could utilize its decisive altitude advantage to dictate the terms of engagement against Japanese Zeros. Moreover, the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Far East and Oceania required an aircraft with exceptional endurance, and the safety redundancy of two engines features the P-38 possessed in spades. It was in this theater that the aircraft became a legend. The P-38 was the weapon of choice for the top Army aces of the Pacific Campaign, including Richard Bong, Thomas Maguire, and Charles H. MacDonald, cementing its legacy not just as a machine, but as a symbol of victory across the vast tyranny of the ocean. But perhaps the P-38's most defining moment, the mission that would etch its silhouette into the annals of history, came when American forces resolved to exact a precise and devastating revenge for the attack on Pearl Harbor. The opportunity arose from the shadows of espionage in April 1943, within the highly classified confines of U.S. Naval Intelligence Initiative known as MAGIC. American cryptographers, working tirelessly to break Japanese codes, intercepted a crucial communication outlining the itinerary of a VIP inspection tour. The target was none other than Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the commander-in-chief of the combined fleet and the strategic architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. The intelligence revealed that Yamamoto would be flying into the Solomon Islands to boost troop morale, providing a fleeting, once-in-a-lifetime window of opportunity. The objective was crystal clear, authorized by the highest office in the land. When the plan reached the desk of President Franklin D. Roosevelt, his order was chillingly simple: get Yamamoto. To execute an assassination of this magnitude required a machine capable of performing the impossible. The mission, designated Operation Vengeance, presented a logistical nightmare. The target area was hundreds of miles deep within hostile territory. Of all the aircraft in the Allied inventory, only one had the range, reliability, and firepower to undertake such a suicidal marathon. 18 Lightnings from the 339th Fighter Squadron of the 347th Fighter Group were selected for the task. Specifically, the mission commanders utilized the P-38G variant, a model specially equipped to carry massive 310-gallon drop tanks under its wings. These external fuel reserves were the only way the fighters could achieve the staggering 1,000-mile round trip required to intercept the Admiral and return home. On the morning of April 18th, the humidity on the airfield at Guadalcanal was thick enough to choke on as the engines roared to life. The fleet took off, burdened by heavy fuel loads, and immediately began one of the most disciplined flights in aviation history. To evade Japanese radar networks that scanned the skies, the American pilots were forced to fly at a terrifyingly low altitude. For over 2 hours, they skimmed the surface of the Pacific, maintaining a height of merely 50 feet above the waves. The mental and physical strain was immense. The pilots navigated by dead reckoning across a featureless ocean, maintaining absolute radio silence to ensure the element of surprise remained intact. They were ghosts skimming the water, racing toward a mathematical point in the sky where intelligence said their target would be. Miraculously, the calculations proved flawless. At 9:34 am, exactly as predicted, the American hunters spotted their quarry above the island of Bougainville. Two Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers, carrying the Admiral and his staff, were flanked by a protective screen of 6 fighters. The silence shattered instantly. The Lightning pilots jettisoned their empty external fuel tanks, the sudden reduction in drag allowing the warbirds to surge forward as they climbed aggressively to engage. The sky erupted into a chaotic dogfight, while a cover group of P-38s ascended to draw off the escorting Zeros, diving and weaving to distract the Japanese Guardians. The killer flight focused solely on the bombers. Lieutenant Rex T. Barber banked his P-38 hard, ignoring the melee around him to chase down the lead bomber. He pushed his engines to the breaking point, closing the distance until the silhouette of the Japanese transport filled his gun sight. With a clear shot lined up, Barber unleashed a torrent of fire. His .50 caliber machine guns shredded the bomber's right engine, then walked the fire along the fuselage and into the tail assembly. The damage was catastrophic. The bomber shuddered violently, rolled over, and plummeted from the sky, crashing into the dense jungle canopy below in a pillar of black smoke and fire. Operation Vengeance remains the longest fighter intercept mission of World War II, a testament to the unique endurance of the fork-tailed devil. The impact of the mission extended far beyond the loss of a single officer. It was a psychological hammer blow. The death of Yamamoto, the seemingly invincible symbol of Japanese naval power, crushed the morale of the Imperial forces. By effectively decapitating the leadership of the combined fleet, the P-38 had not only exacted revenge for the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, but had arguably set the stage for the inevitable Allied victory in the Pacific. If the P-38 possessed a single defining characteristic beyond its lethal grace, It was an unmatched versatility that allowed it to transcend the traditional boundaries of aerial warfare. While it was born as an interceptor, the airframe's unique combination of long-range endurance and a high-altitude service ceiling made it the perfect candidate for a different kind of mission: intelligence. Stripped of its heavy weaponry and fitted with high-resolution cameras, the aircraft was transformed into a remarkable photo reconnaissance platform. In this role, it was ranked second only to the legendary British de Havilland Mosquito. These unarmed variants, relying solely on speed and altitude for survival, were responsible for capturing an estimated 90% of all aerial film intelligence gathered over Europe, acting as the eyes of the Allied command before the invasion of Normandy. The adaptability of the Lightning's design led to some truly radical modifications. A handful of airframes were converted into a configuration known affectionately as the droop snoot. In this variation, the solid nose containing the machine guns was replaced with a plexiglass nose cone, housing a bombardier and a Norden bomb sight. This allowed the P-38 to act as a pathfinder, leading formations of standard P-38s loaded with bombs to their targets with pinpoint accuracy. Beyond this, the Lightning branched out into a staggering 18 distinct models, evolving to meet every need of the war effort. It served as a fighter bomber capable of carrying a payload equal to early heavy bombers, a radar-equipped night fighter hunting in the darkness, and a long-range escort that shepherded fragile bombers deep into enemy territory. The evolution of the aircraft was rapid and relentless. The first variant to become available in significant quantity was the F model, which introduced crucial survivability upgrades such as self-sealing fuel tanks and armor plating to protect the pilot. However, the apex of the design appeared much later in the conflict. The P-38L was a true monster of the skies, boasting a top speed of 414 miles per hour and the ability to climb to a staggering 44,000 feet an altitude where the air was thin and lethal. This definitive version packed a devastating punch, armed with a 20mm autocannon and 4.50 caliber machine guns, a concentration of firepower that could disintegrate an enemy airframe with a single burst. Despite its superior performance, the P-38 was a complex machine to build. Because it was manufactured exclusively by Lockheed, it was produced in considerably smaller quantities than the simpler, mass-produced Republic P-47 Thunderbolt or the North American P-51 Mustang. Roughly 10,000 Lightnings rolled off the assembly lines, compared to the 15,000 Mustangs that flooded the skies. Yet the impact of those 10,000 units was disproportionately massive. Together, Lightnings flew more than 130,000 sorties across every major theater of the war, from the frozen Aleutians to the deserts of Africa. Most notably in the Pacific Theater, the P-38 earned a distinct honor. Its pilots combined to shoot down more Japanese aircraft than any other fighter in the US inventory. Following the surrender of the Axis powers, the rapid advent of the jet age rendered the piston engine fighters obsolete. The P-38 was quickly dropped from active service, and thousands were scrapped, their aluminum melted down to build the future. However, the fork-tailed Devil remains fondly remembered by historians, and most importantly, by the men who trusted it with their lives. The reverence for the machine is perhaps best summarized by the man who first tested it, Colonel Ben Kelsey. Looking back on the legacy of the aircraft, he described it with a mixture of respect and affection. That comfortable old cluck would fly like hell, fight like a wasp upstairs, and land like a butterfly. Today, the roar of the twin Allison engines is a rare sound, echoing only at select air shows where a precious few airworthy survivors still take to the sky. Yet the legacy of the P-38 Lightning endures far beyond the metal and rivets of the remaining airframes. It stands as a timeless testament to a specific moment in human history where desperation fueled innovation, and where the genius of Clarence Kelly Johnson dared to defy the established laws of aerodynamics. In an era dominated by conformity, the Lightning was a radical departure, a bridge between the piston-driven past and the high-performance future of flight. To the enemies who feared its silhouette, it remained the fork-tailed Devil until the very end. But to the pilots who sat in that quiet cockpit, looking out over those long, twin nacelles as they crossed vast oceans and hostile continents, it was something far more profound. It was a guardian, a masterpiece of engineering, and arguably the most beautiful fighter to ever grace the skies. Thank you for joining us on this journey through aviation history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the legend of the P-38 Lightning, please share your thoughts in the comments section below.